Welcome to this week's Ask Charlie. Now, I hope you're not distracted by raindrops on the roof. I've actually had to put my jumper on because it is cold. It is miserable. I have got a mug of peppermint tea here, so I suggest you grab a cuppa of something and sit down, get cosy and listen to this week's Ask Charlie. I have got a Florence? You can't see her, she's right here. I'm not going to get her too excited because she'll be a pest, but the dogs are here. And somebody got in touch last week and said, Charlie, would you talk to us about your fertility journey? They're going through their own fertility journey at the moment, and would I share my story? And I have never sat down and chatted about it in this way ever before. I think mainly because I felt like it wasn't much of a journey. It was and it wasn't. I don't know. It's really hard to know because I didn't end up going down the IVF track, but we were about to. And then I was sort of thinking about it and thinking, what's Ask Charlie all about? Ask Charlie is about teaching practical skills, making life easier, and me sharing my own kind of personal experiences with you all, that hopefully in me sharing what I've been through might help you in some way, or you might know somebody that's going through something and you can say, oh, I was listening to this girl chattering on about something and she suggested this, so it might be worth a go. And that is literally how my fertility journey ended up being resolved, not how it started. So we're going to backtrack to my early 20s. I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, osteopenia, having a really low estrogen level in my early 20s. Now, I am not a medical professional at all. This is very much my story, my journey, and we're talking about over 20 years ago. So I cannot remember the exact specific details. So bear with me. I just want to caveat this chat with that. But I thought it was actually important to share because it is amazing how I ended up having my children, and I still am mind blown by it to this day. So when I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and those other diagnoses, I was never really kind of sat down and explained what was going on. I suppose the gynecologist I saw explained the most to me. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome can affect your hormones. Whether that has caused my low estrogen level, I don't know. Often people with a low estrogen level, it's because they over-exercise and they don't nourish their body properly. I have never had an eating disorder, and I've never over-exercised to the extent that it would have an effect on my estrogen level. Love exercise, but I'm not that kind of person. So whether it's caused by my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I don't know. It does have an effect on your hormones, but it is quite complicated and everybody is very different. But the gynecologist that I saw, because my estrogen level, they picked up that my estrogen level was low, and that can cause osteoporosis, osteopenia. So I was put on to the contraceptive pill to boost my estrogen level to increase my bone density ultimately. And the gynecologist said to me, you are always going to struggle to conceive, but when you are ready to start a family, come and see me and we will sort it out. So when things were looking pretty serious with Simon, I said, you should just be aware of the fact that I have been told that I might struggle to conceive. And Simon was really keen to start a family because of the age gap. He was quite keen to get cracking. And actually, knowing what I did know, I knew that it necessarily wasn't going to happen overnight. So we both went to see my gynecologist, I think before he even proposed to me. And we sat down and went through what our options were. And then my mum never knew this, bless her, but we actually started our fertility journey before we got married because we were aware it was going to take a bit of time, and we had a year's engagement, which was my mother's request, and we didn't want to then wait a long time after the wedding to start the ball rolling. So the process started before we were married, but don't tell anyone that. And it did take quite a long time. I came off the pill, they monitored what was happening naturally, and I wasn't ovulating. And so then I was put on a fertility drug called Clomid, and I was then monitored really carefully as to what was happening. And every cycle I wasn't ovulating, and it wasn't stimulating my ovaries to ovulate, which is what it's designed to do, I believe, and forgive me if I'm wrong. And it just wasn't working. And so the dose kept being increased and it still wasn't working. And this is over quite a period of time. And it got to the point that I was feeling really, really out of sorts. By this stage we were married, and poor Simon, I mean, I was a bit of a nightmare. I was having hot flushes, my mood swings were all over the place. I was a bit of a wreck, to be honest. And I think the pressure, like anyone that struggles to conceive will totally relate to the pressure. Like everywhere you look, you see a buggy, you see a pregnant woman, you see something on the TV that's child baby related, and it's stressful, and you put so much pressure on yourself. And Simon had said to me, I really want to be a dad before I'm 50. And time was ticking. It really was ticking. And I, without realizing, I think also because of the person I am, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and it wasn't working. It just was not working. And this is why I love my darling husband so much. He said, right, sat me down very calmly and said, right, this isn't working, we need a plan B. And I have made a few phone calls, and I've been recommended an amazing gynecologist. He's not taking on any new patients, but he has agreed to see you. And I think we need a second opinion, darling, to see what's going on. And I had been with my gynecologist since I was about 20, and I liked him. He was a really nice chap. I had a good relationship with him. I didn't really want a second opinion, but I said to Sigh, okay, fine, why not? This clearly isn't working, and I can see you're at your wit's end. So we went for the second opinion, and it actually was so fortuitous, and it's so weird how some things just are meant to be. It was the day of my period, the day I had my appointment. So that was the first day of that cycle. And he said, great, I don't want you to take any more Clomid. It's clearly not working, and I want you to come off that. And I want to monitor you for a cycle and see exactly what is going on. And then we're going to sit down and go through our options and work out a plan going forward. And that will probably involve IVF. If the Clomid hasn't worked, then, you know, we're going to have to look at the other options and see how we can get you ovulating and what have you. And that to me was actually the worst thing I wanted to hear. I came out of that appointment, I cried. I can still remember how I felt. I felt really deflated. I felt a bit angry. I was going to have an entire cycle of doing nothing. That was like wasting time. I was like, that's not what I want to hear. I want to do something today. I don't want to waste more time. And I'm sure that some of you may be able to relate to that feeling. Anyhow, I then had a conversation with a very, very dear friend, and she could hear how frustrated I was. And I said to her, what am I going to do? And she said, okay, Charlie, I want you just to hear me out on this. There's a guy in Southfields that does acupuncture. And I know a couple of people that have been to him, and they think he's amazing. And like one of her family members had been, and somebody else, maybe her cousin or something. And she said, he specializes in fertility, and he's an acupuncturist. And I think it's worth giving it a whirl. Like, what have you got to lose? And I was like, okay, what have I got to lose? I mean, clearly I'm not going to get pregnant right now. So I may as well go and see him because I have nothing else to lose. So I booked in to see him. Now, Simon and I had also been trying to buy a home. And we've been trying to buy a home for quite a few years, and everything, we were gazumped left, right and centre. Everything was going to sealed bids. It was a nightmare trying to find a home in Sussex for the pair of us. So he was living in a rented cottage and I was living in a flat in London, and it was all quite stressful. And we completed on this house on the 13th of December, and I had my appointment with the new gynecologist about that time. And then I went to see Adrian Stoddard on the 20th of December of that year. And I cried, and I was at a very, very low point. And I'm feeling emotional just talking about it. God, I'm such a baby. I need to kind of pull myself together. I went to see him and I was really emotional, and bless him, I think he took my hands and said, this is going to be okay. He put me on this crazy diet of like leaving skin on things or skins off things. I don't know. It was like some crazy gut cleanse diet, which I thought was pretty wacky, but why not give it a shot? And he said, I want to see you every week. And that was that. So I did it. Archie was conceived on the 12th of January the following year. Like, December was my first appointment with Adrian. I saw him every week. He was open between Christmas and New Year. I was really on it. I think I even saw him sometimes twice a week because I was really low. I think it's definitely the beginning of January. And Archie was conceived on the 12th. And the gynecologist I was seeing that was monitoring me, it was really, and he's a very old-fashioned, he's now retired. Oh, girls, no. He was really old-fashioned, and his secretary would phone me up and say, Mrs. Gray, can you come in for you've got your appointment or whatever. And she called me up and she said, Mrs. Gray, some very unusual blood test results have come back. We'd like to repeat them. So could you come back in tomorrow, whatever it was? I said, okay, fine. And then she called me up and she said, Mrs. Gray, are you sitting down? We think you're pregnant. Both those results would indicate that you have conceived. And the gynecologist couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. And Adrian was rather smug and was like, yeah, I got it working for you. And that's my fertility journey, the power of acupuncture. And because I was convinced that nothing was going to happen that cycle, I initially was irritated, pretty peed off that we were wasting time. But I kind of put it out of my mind because I knew it wasn't going to happen. And I think sometimes when you take the pressure off yourself, these things naturally happen. And we had also got a home, which we hadn't had before. And your body is so clever. Things happen for a reason. They happen at the right time. They happen when you're actually ready. And I hadn't been ready before when I was living in a one-bedroom flat in London and my husband was living in a rented cottage that was so tiny it wouldn't fit me in, and my rather large wardrobe. So, it is amazing. And I had no history of ovulating until I had seen Adrian, and he triggered everything to start working again as it should, and I released eggs, and miracle as Arch was conceived. And it took us all by surprise. And I think having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome made pregnancy quite challenging, but I was induced with all 3 pregnancies, but I had them naturally, no C-sections, because birth can be very quick when you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Because I have so much elasticity in my muscles and joints, when you're pregnant, you release hormones that have even more. And so I was dislocating things left, right, and centre. All 3 pregnancies were relatively challenging, but births were pretty good, pretty quick, pretty swift, and amazing. And I feel so unbelievably blessed. And then Coco came along very quickly, and we had a conversation after having Coco, and Coco took us by surprise. I hadn't planned to have 3 children in rapid succession. There's 2.5 years between the 3 of them. There's 15 months and then 14 months, which is completely crazy. And they are currently 15, 14, and going to be 13 at the end of May. And then for until September, they're 15, 14, and 13. I mean, that is bonkers. And having had, fertility problems. And so I think it is really important to look at other options. I was really, really lucky that my friend said, have you thought about acupuncture? This guy has got a really good track record. It's worth giving it a shot. And I still see Adrian to this day. He is a complete miracle worker. And I know that because I'm living proof. I also went to see Adrian because Archie was breech, and my gynecologist doesn't believe, he's now retired, in manually turning a baby. So I was booked in for a C-section, which I really didn't want. And I said to Adrian, the baby's breech and it's such a shame, I'm going to have a C-section. He said, Charlie, I'll see what I can do. He put some needles in certain places in my stomach, and the baby turned around and I had a natural birth. I mean, pretty phenomenal. And the C-section, the theatre slot was booked. I was ready to have, we knew which day we were having our baby. And so, right at the last minute, Adrian managed to turn the baby. And then I saw him after I had Archie, and then Coco I actually found out that I was 12 weeks pregnant with Coco. I had no idea. I thought that I was just feeling a bit under the weather. So I called my gynecologist secretary and said, Carol, I'm not feeling great. And she said, well, why don't you come in and we'll do some bloods and we'll see what's going on. And she called me again, Mrs. Gray, are you sitting down? You're pregnant, and we don't think you're just pregnant. We think it's quite advanced, you're not quite advanced, but you know what I mean. She said, well, I think we should book you in for a scan. And that was my 12-week scan with Coco, which is just extraordinary. And then Simon and I were talking about whether I was going to go back onto the pill, what I was going to do contraceptive-wise after having Coco. And Simon, I remember the conversation so clearly, we had it just next door. And he said, well, because things took quite a long time to have Archie, I think let's not interfere with things. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and if it's not, it's not. And Gus was conceived. So 3 children in 2.5 years was bonkers. But I feel that they're my little miracles. And so I hope, we didn't have to go down the IVF route. We almost did. But I think it is about looking at other options, and I do feel really, really blessed. And I hope that this gives you some hope if you are struggling. And I know so many people struggle, but think of the other options and try them out. And I will leave Adrian's details linked down below, because the man is a miracle worker. He is phenomenal. I went to see him, 18 months ago, when all my hair was falling out because of COVID. I had long COVID, and one of the effects of long COVID can be significant hair loss. Now, my gynecologist retired after I gave birth to Gus, and I actually hemorrhaged very, very badly after Gus and had a prolapse, and it was quite stressful. And he said, please, Mrs. Gray, no more children, certainly for a while. He retired, and then I actually now see his son. So I've kept it in the family, and his son is, both of them are wonderful men, and I feel very, very lucky that I have this sort of wonderful long-standing relationship with him. And I went to see him. I thought it was menopause symptoms, which is why my hair was falling out. And he said, Charlie, because of my estrogen level, which is still really low, he said, you're on the pill. That would mask all menopause and perimenopause symptoms. So this is something else that's going on. This isn't menopause, perimenopause related. what is going on right now. And I explained that I had COVID. I explained that things were difficult and I was quite stressed out. And he said significant hair loss can be caused by COVID. And so I went to see Adrian, and within 5 days of that appointment with Adrian, my hair stopped falling out. And, you know, I have had it all chopped off, but look, there's loads of hair now. And that is Adrian Stoddard. He really is a miracle worker. And I hope that me sharing my journey offers you a little bit of comfort. I know, and mine was only short. I know how painful and challenging it is. I've been there with some dear friends experiencing, you know, huge challenges and loss and what have you. And it is painful. And I hope that this video hasn't triggered feelings for you, because I know it's a very, very sensitive subject. And I think one that us women need to talk about openly and share what's going on. But at the same time, it's difficult to share what's going on when you see people all around you having children and celebrating and all of those things. So I understand. And yes, I'm sending love. Thank you for asking your questions and letting me share my experiences with you. I am really, really grateful that you feel that you can ask questions, because I think it's important. And I think one other thing that I would give advice to, if anyone is wanting to start a family, but putting it off for whatever reason, is just go and ask for a blood test and have your hormones checked, because I know so many people that have put off starting a family and then struggled massively. And I had my children, I was 28, 29 and 30 when I had them. And I actually had a blood test a couple of years after I had Gus. And it showed that my hormone levels had dropped right off again, and that it would be really difficult to conceive. And I had that conversation with my gynae, and I was quite surprised. Like, I was probably 32, 33, and being told that I would really struggle to have more children. And that's quite young. People are leaving it a lot later. So I think that is something to be mindful of as well. And if you are in that stage, it's worth going and getting a blood test and just seeing where your hormone levels are. There are so many amazing things that can be done these days. Things have moved on and are moving on all of the time. And I know various friends that have had, you know, egg collection and save their eggs. And that is something to think of as well. If you're not in a position to start a family or not ready for the right whatever reasons, looking into doing that. I know it's expensive, and I'm very, very lucky that we've been in a position that I could go and see a gynecologist privately and go through that and have appointments with Adrian. So I really hope that this has been helpful. I am sending so much love, and thank you for tuning in. Do keep your questions coming, because I'm here to help if I can. And I will see you on Friday with a new vlog.